bad. Hey-oh, it worked. Hello, everybody.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, so I'm very excited because we switched over from Streamlabs. Now we're doing OBS. So I hope all the things are working, but I'm sure people in the chat will let us know if things are not working. So for those who don't know, I'm one half of Salt and Sass. I'm Mandy. Hello, hello.
Hi, everybody, and I'm Suzanne.
Welcome to our, I guess you'd say, like live review of Oros.
So we're trying something a little different for us because, for transparency's sake, originally we thought we were going to live stream a play of Oros.
Yeah.
That was before we actually got Oros
Yeah, exactly.
and
That's
played it.
easy.
And then we realized, this is actually would be really challenging because for those of you who don't know, Mandy lives in Canada. I live in the Seattle, Washington, United States area. So we're nowhere near each other. So
Right.
when we do live plays together, we actually do them remotely. And I think, to be honest, I think we're really good at it in terms of coming up with systems that let us try to work with each other and things like that. Hey, Branchlings, thanks for
Yes,
joining.
hello.
Welcome for the first time. And so but we realized with Oros, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and it would just be extraordinarily challenging for me to, uh, dictate my turns to Mandy and for her to have to
Yeah.
operate everything. So we're like, well, how do we talk about Oros in a fun way without doing a live play? Well, we're like, let's try a live stream video review. That way, folks who are in the chat can ask questions and everybody can see the game and play because it is a very pretty game.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
hey, let's give it a whirl. I was gonna say what's the worst that can happen, but that feels like a curse.
Have you
So
thought about it? Yeah, like the way this day is going for me right now, let's just, yeah.
yeah, it's that's you're a trooper, Mandy.
No, it's good.
So Oros is designed by Brant Brinkerhoff and it is published by I don't I think Lucky Duck picked it up,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure who if is it Ace Games. This is what it looks like, and this is probably gonna mess
Yeah.
with my camera. Sorry, Mandy.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, I see it on the
But
bottom there. Yeah.
yeah, and I should know that, right? But it just goes to show how off kilter I am today that I
No,
can't
that's
even know that.
okay.
But it's a very pretty cover. I love the cover of it,
It's so
right?
pretty.
And this was crowdfunded a little while ago. And what we have and what you're going to be seeing on Mandy's table today is the retail edition. So if you were to want to go and pick up Oros after this stream, what you see is likely what you're going to get unless you go to one of those Kickstarter
Right.
after sales kind of places and things like that. But please know that this is the retail edition because, quite frankly, the Kickstarter edition is a little fancier when it
Oh,
comes to components.
yeah, I saw it and I was like, pardon? Like there were
Yeah,
there were a few changes.
which is fine. And Mandy, you and I have talked about this a lot, but for most games,
Yeah.
I don't need all the fancy bits. Like
No,
I'm
no.
good. I'm a
Exactly.
basic girl. So I have no problems with and also to be clear, the components in the retail edition of Boros are lovely.
Yeah.
I don't have any quality issues there. Although Mandy, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So this
Ask.
is the player board, the personal player board for
Yes.
Oros.
Yes.
And it's a coated cardboard.
Yeah.
It's got some spring to it, right? But mine has holes, like intentional, like binder punch holes
Yep.
at the top. What are those for?
Yeah, so I also questioned this until I went to game night the other night, and the table beside us was also playing Oros, and that is for there's like a piece that goes on top to make it have what's the word? Not divots, but like an overlay,
Oh.
so your pieces stay in place.
Oh.
That's why. So like you put that, and then yeah, it prevents things from moving around and stuff on the board. However, I did hear that there were some challenges with it because I think it was starting to do one of these like lift off the board so it
Oh,
wasn't staying
yeah, that could
flat
be rough.
down. Yeah, so that's what I also wondered, and that's what it's for. If there's another piece if you have the deluxe version, or maybe it's something you can buy separately to kind of make divot is not the word I'm looking for. When something recessed makes the board look more recessed.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
like a dual layer kind of
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Totally. Yeah,
exactly.
no, I got it.
Yeah.
So we can just go over at a high level of how Oros plays and then showcase it a little bit and then, talk about our experiences with it. Sound good, Mandy?
That sounds like a plan. So, did you want to do it from here, or did you want me to switch over to the other
Let's
screen?
let's showcase the player board first.
Okay, and before we jump over, anybody who has questions in the chat, I'm using a new program now, so I can't exactly see how many people are watching, but put those questions in. Ask those questions. That's why we're doing it live, so you can ask that. All right.
Great. So, well, first of all, here's the shared board, right?
Yeah.
And Mandi has already set it up for play where you see these land things. If you could show Mandi, they have like little circle numbers on them. These are individual island tiles that will be pushed around the board like a sliding puzzle almost. And the number on it indicates the strength of that land tile. And what's going to happen is that these are going to collide into each other and increase in value up to a value of 4. And on the right there, you see the temple track and ascension track. And ultimately, hey, to win the game, or at least to trigger the game end, you're going to be calculating your points, and you've got little score markers that are going to be going up that track. When somebody hits top, the game end is triggered, and everybody gets like equal turns, and then whoever has the highest score wins. Shock me, right?
Exactly.
So how are we going to do all this? Now that's what's going to happen. But really, this is kind of an action selection game, right, Mandi? On our personal player boards that everybody gets. You get a player color. You're going to get some
swap on over
extra tiles, and you're going to get meeples and markers in your own player color here. Oh, look at Mandi. It's almost like you were prepared for this.
What?
Right? And on the left there, those little like the L shape and the little 2 square bar, those are shrines that will ultimately go on tiles. Then you have your meeples, and then you can kind of see the horizontal decorative bars that are highlighting your position on these tracks. Along the bottom here, we have these white locations at the bottom of all these columns. These are the actions that you get to select from. So when you start the game, you're going to have a certain number of meeples. And on your turn, you're just going to place a meeple onto the action that you want to take, which is interesting because then it blocks that action. So you cannot take the same action twice in a row. You need to move that meeple off of that location before you can take that action again. So there's a lot of action management within just your own personal space. Other players are not going to influence what you can do on your own board there. So ultimately, you're going to be taking actions that will let you slide around tiles, that will let you build these shrines, that will let you move your meeples around on the map itself, on those different island tiles, or that will let you advance you to different levels on these tracks as well, because these can also get you points and abilities as you go. That's about it, right? We play until somebody hits that point threshold and go from there. At a high level, Mandi, I think that probably covers the basics. We didn't talk about sending people to study or anything, but maybe we can go through what those actions available are. Do you want to go through that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So let's just quickly, I'm going to kind of swing between 2 boards, but just so you can see. So I've kind of set it up like how it is in the beginning, but normally what ends up happening is you end up taking one of these, and it ends up having to take the action of going out onto the board. So normally that's how it would be set up. That would be your first action, and then you would have 2 more to place here to take action. So just bear that in mind when you're playing. Okay, so but we're going to scooch ahead. So I will put one out here just to show that it's out, but we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so the first action we have here is to shift all tiles in a row. So shift and move got me so confused because I kept saying the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, but they're specifically talking about shifting all tiles in a row. So let's go over to the other side here. There we go. So what's interesting about this board is you'll notice we have an outside track, and actually, I think this is the smaller board. There's another side of the board which has another kind of line here for people to move around on the board, because these are in fact adjacent. So that's something to consider when you're shifting. So if we are shifting from what we looked at our board when we had 1 moment of shift, we would shift the entire row. So something like this would push this over here, and then this bad boy, oh good gravy, comes over here. There we go. So that is a shift, which is different than a move. So let's pop back over here. So there's going to be a lot of switching back and forth here. I apologize.
You're doing great.
Let's see here. Okay. So that was shift. And you notice that I only got to shift 1 space because I only had that option here. As you move them up, you'll have more ability.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah. And you can even move mountains. will move. Yeah, okay, there's a song there somewhere. But normally if you have mountains, which we'll talk about, don't get shifted. Next we have move tiles. And this threw me for a loop because it does actually have to be the configuration that's depicted here on the screen. I had to get some clarification because I was a little worried about that, but it does have to be 3 that are set like this, and you're moving them in one direction. So up, left, right. So you're trying to collide at this point, and this is what
I like your dance move.
I know,
Up,
right?
left. You're like,
And there's, I think, a question in the chat, Suzanne. Just I'm going to switch over, but
how many players? It plays 1 to 4.
yeah, we'll talk in the review about
We'll
solo.
talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, there's some changes there. So moving is great, and moving is great because now this is a kind of a tricky way to set this up, but what you end up wanting to do, and I'm going to kind of like so technically that should have been filled, but let's just do that just for our purposes today. And I'm going to show you what happens when we do a move action. So when we do a move, remember I showed you it had 3 tiles in a row, 1, 2, 3. We want to boop, move it into there because why? This combines with this. And we want these to happen because we need those 4 tiles to make mountains. So merging cells.
You want those collisions.
Right, you want those collisions to happen. So this 2 and a 1 would become...
I know. The magic of math.
A 3! Yay! And then these move over beside it. So when they hit each other like that, they merge. And that's important. And now, keeping in mind, if you notice, the tiles are a little different. 3s will have the lands kind of organized differently. You want to try and have those lands together so you can traverse those later. This is great, but in order for us to get mountain tiles, these ones here, we need these to be bigger numbers. I think they need to be 4s if I'm not mistaken.
4 and 4.
4 and 4.
Yep.
So in order for a mountain to happen, this would have had to, I'm just throwing it out here, this would have had to be a 4, this would have had to be a 4, and if they had collided, it would have made a mountain.
And mountains cannot move.
Yes.
Until you unlock that ability on your personal player board. But in general, mountains ain't going anywhere.
No, and mountains are important.
You got to work around them.
Exactly. Okay, let me switch back over to here. There we go. So the next one we have is erupting or forming volcanoes. And like if you're starting at the bottom, it allows you to erupt 1, or you can add a volcano value 3 to a tile. All right, so you'll notice
and similarly to the tiles go 1 to 4, and then you get a mountain. Volcanoes also go level 1 to 4, and there's, as Mandi will go through, there's some eruption and spreading of lava and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So erupting is great. Because that allows you to, and this is something that we used a lot, it allows you to kind of like allow the lava to seep over to create, more tiles in areas, for example, that might not have. Ideally, if you have volcanoes, for example, like here, this would allow you to like, I'm going to explode it, this one, and then you can have it trickle over into here, or potentially into another tile. So that ends up making you an additional tile. So I think, and this is where I always forget what happens with the volcanoes when they erupt. It turns into, I think it's 2. There's nothing there, so I think this just becomes a 2 tile.
Right. It flows in. Yes.
Yeah, it flows into here. Sorry.
I think so. Yes.
Yes, and I have to make sure that that's a land so we can traverse it. But I believe that's what happens. It erupts. Pew, new tile comes out, and that comes away. If you did it into another tile, it's a lot of math. If you did it into another tile, you would just add that value, and any difference becomes a volcano that I've just dropped on the floor. Sorry, it's a little crazy. Okay, so that's what a volcano does. Or the other option in that action instead is you can actually place
just add a volcano.
One, and that can be, wherever. So there we go. Yep. Great. We're going to add a level 3. Now, strategic placing is important. I'm just kind of going through it for the motions. Yeah. Do we have any questions so far as I get to
just a question from Branchleans about what we think about the graphics. It sounds like they don't love the aesthetics of the game.
Okay.
Mandi, what are your thoughts on the graphics or the aesthetics, which aren't always the same?
I like it. I think it's a very pretty game. Some of the color choices, though, for player boards and stuff, I didn't fully understand. Once you start getting things on the board, like the volcanoes and things like that, I find it covers up a lot of the stuff, so you don't really see it anyway. I like the way it looks. Functionally, I'm kind of on the fence about it. So
Yeah, I personally like the illustration style that they use, the kind of more modern graphic style of illustration. So I like the illustration.
mhm.
Um, I think I had maybe moments during gameplays that, I wish it was a little more clear here or whatever. But that wasn't for me personally. It
Right.
wasn't like a big sticking point.
Yeah, exactly. Like it
But
wasn't. Yeah,
aesthetics, especially like when it comes to illustration style, are so subjective. So I completely understand
yes,
if there are folks that prefer other styles of illustration.
absolutely. No, for sure. So the next action we're looking at is to send to return from study. So
And
again,
study's a big deal.
it is, and this is something that's I didn't utilize, underutilized for me. But obviously, having to place one of your people on it, I should have reiterated that to take that action. But you would then, I'm just going to show you an example here, because you get 3 actions on your turn, so 3 people to kind of move around. So if I'd done this, send to return from study, I can take 1, because depending on where I am here, but I think it's just the 1, that I can send up here to study. And eventually, if I could take that action again, I can send another. So that's one thing you can do to send to study. Or I could instead send to, whoops, we want this one. Oh, so I'm pressing all the wrong buttons here. All the wrong buttons. Sorry, doing so many things at once, it throws me off a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
Oh, gosh, I know. Tough life. So you can also take one of your workers here, and I should say workers, but, one of your peoples,
They
and you
call
can...
them followers, actually.
Followers, okay, send them out to the
Yeah,
board.
there's a definitely a whole, like a tribal vibe to it. Yeah.
Right. And my friend who's Greek said Oros is mountains. Oh my gosh, did I remember that correctly? I hope
Makes
so.
sense.
I'm
Okay.
so sorry if that's wrong, but I think that's what he said. So you can't just send them out to the board. So just for our purposes, we'll just pretend that we had a mountain out here.
Right.
You can send them out to... We're getting to this action, but I'll put one out here anyway.
Yeah.
Sending them out to a... what's the word I'm looking for? A site, sacred site. Okay, so this is where they can't just willy-nilly put them out. They have to come there. So it's important to build those sacred sites, which is an action we're going to talk about.
No willy-nilly for you.
Exactly. Okay, so that's what happens with followers in that way, but you can also return them to you. So let us do this one. And you can return them from the board, or you can return them from here. And when you return them from here, so they come back and they have to go onto a space here that's not occupied, so you're covering up an action, but you get wisdom. And wisdom is good. So for every one you bring back here, you get wisdom. Wisdom lets you move these up. So if I had 1 wisdom from bringing that back, I would get to move that up. And this is important, especially when you're looking at these here, because if you want to release these other followers, you need to get all of these up past that line. Great, I get this one. If they move up here, I get this one. So this is really important. Additionally, getting them to the top gets you points at the end of the game. Okay? So that was...
If you get them up there.
If you get them up. Yeah, if you don't, well, you're out of luck there. But if you do, and then it also gives you more ascension points, which we'll talk about afterwards. Suzanne touched on that a little bit. Journey followers is just moving them. So I know we're going to do back and forth. So if I need to come back, please let me know. Okay. So for example, and I probably should have had other colors out here so you could see. We can't build too much here yet, because I haven't talked about the action, but we'll just say for our purposes, this is what's going to happen with the build eventually, get to that. But if you want to move to another area, you can't be on the same tile as somebody else unless it's kind of one of these situations here. And I should probably put this like this. That journey action allows you to move your followers. So coming off of a site, you actually have to count the tile. So coming down the stairs practically. So it's like 1 to come down, and then... Well, I can't go that way because there's water, but here, let's say I had a movement of 2. And this is dictated on how high you move up that track on your board that I was talking about earlier. So journeying allows you to move them around the board. Why do you want to move? Well, you want to move so when you do create those mountains, you can build your temples. Just saying.
Hi, Amanda Pando. Thanks for joining, and thanks for taking that action on the spam. I love you like an angel. Just
on it, right?
amazing. It's so great to have you here.
Okay, so this is the last action, which is build, and I kind of started talking about it a little bit. This is what you need to build those sacred sites. So if we quickly swing on back here, the build action, I kind of started doing it already, but in order to build, obviously you need to be there. Okay, let's take that off. And whoever builds first has to build the monolith first, which
Bottom
is
there.
the one with the L shape there, which is the one I put out here. Okay. Now, someone else can build there if they want. And let's just do this. Now, I'm sorry, I should say before I continue, building there gets you wisdom. And wisdom is good. So, I mean, it lets you move up your tracks. I mean, what's wrong with that? But if somebody else comes here and builds, okay, then if you notice, they can't build the same shape. They got to build the next one. Okay. And they build. Let's say they're here and they build. And you are
And
there. Yeah, go ahead.
not sorry to interrupt you, man, but and it has to be somebody different building every level. Once you build on a specific tile or a specific location, you cannot build again on that specific tile.
Yeah. So you can't build again, and people can't be building the same shape as somebody previous to you.
Correct. Yep.
So being here when someone builds is great, because guess what? You get a wisdom. But if you move away and they build, but your tile's there, you don't get any wisdom. Okay? So keep that in mind.
You are not wise.
Not wise. So building is good because it gets you wisdom, and we remember what wisdom does. Wisdom is the one that
Elevate
moves
your level.
these up, and these are going to be great for end of game. So those are the gist, okay? I didn't get into too many details, but those are the gists of the actions, okay, to give you an idea. You're probably wondering what these are. I didn't like using these, and I didn't use these.
They're action markers, right? They show what actions you've got planned and what you've done, right?
Yes.
That you can use below your little bar to do it. For what it's worth, we actually did use them occasionally, but not
Sure.
out of habit. It was more like if later in the game and things like that. But they're not mandatory. But it's nice that they're provided for folks that
Sure.
do like to play it that way. So
Yeah.
that's
The only times that it got a little confusing is if you were pulling people back from here.
exactly. No,
That's the
exactly. Yeah.
only time I feel that you might have to use them, but other than that, I wasn't finding it a huge thing. I'm going to quickly go back here to the main game because we didn't really talk about the Ascension track, but when you do gain Ascension points, you're moving up here, and what's nice is if someone's in front of you, you count their space, but you can't land on it, so it actually bumps you ahead, which is
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah.
I'm
Little
like, I'm
skip,
about that.
little
Skipping a
leapfrog
jump.
action.
And when you get to
Yeah, I
these,
love it when I kept on getting leapfrogged and never
right?
got to be the frog or
That was
whatever.
me. That was me. And then these little red spaces here just let you know on the board anywhere there are tiles that are in these kind of like red squares, they're going to get a volcano on them. And I think it's either a level 2 or 3. I can't remember offhand. But they do get a
I honestly
volcano on them.
don't
I think
remember.
it's a 2 or 3. But they get anyone in that red square, they're going to get that. And then, like Suzanne said, once someone hits the top, that's going to trigger end of the game. Equal number of turns, and the game will end. This is one side of the board. There's another side for a longer 4-player game. This game has some length already, so this might be something you might want to try after a couple of plays once you've gotten the rules down.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, I think we covered most of it, or all like
Take
most of the important
actions, do
things.
all the things, try to get some points. Bob's your uncle, win the game. Easy peasy, right, Mandy?
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want me to show here. I was just going to swing us
No, I
back
think that's
to.
a great overview. Yeah.
Okay, so let's head back over here. Okay. Do you want to go first? Because I do have some things to say.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I think that I was really excited about Oros because I loved the tile colliding element. There's games like 2048 or threes, which is just real simple sliding things where you slide numbers into each other and they add up and they grow. There's a game called Triple Town. These are video
Hmm.
games, app games, where you combine little teddy bears and bushes and they'll grow to trees and castles and all this. It's adorable and has eaten up way too much of my time in my life. I love that concept of trying to bring that to the analog space of
Yeah.
sliding these tiles together and doing that. There is a game that not a ton of people know about called Garden of Minions.
Hmm.
This was published in Japan. It is a solo player game in which you are using dice and you can combine as dice collide with each other, they add up pips and things like that, and they become monsters and all this other stuff. I love it. And so I was really excited about Oros trying to bring this tile sliding, colliding, growing
Hmm.
element to the game. And so that was one thing I was really, really excited about. I also like this action selection, and I actually thought the action selection worked quite well. I liked that you were limited in what you could do,
Right.
and you had to be really
Oh,
out what you want to do because
sorry. Repeat that, Suzanne. You
not
got a little frozen there.
oh sorry. So you do have to be strategic and plan ahead what you want to do on the action track, and I like that because you do not want to be in a situation where you are ready to build, but the build action is blocked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of a sudden you've got, another turn before you can take that because you could lose ground pretty quickly that way.
Absolutely.
So I actually really, really like overall the way that that action selection track works and
Hmm.
how, um, you know, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because you control it, you are making your choices there. So yay, you're in control. On the other hand, if things start to slide sideways, you really have nobody to blame but yourself,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely.
And so there's that element to it as well. And I ended up really, really liking the action selection. Ultimately, for me, the tile sliding did not live up to my hopes.
Yeah.
And that was something I was really excited for. And so maybe it's an expectation situation as well. But we struggled with the rules in our first play,
Yeah.
understanding the difference between shifting and moving and when the collisions would happen, the way that the tracks wrap around, and with the graphic design that Branchings brought up earlier. We found in our first play, it's great that they did these dotted lines around the corners, but it wasn't like we had to do a lot of cognitive lifting to do the basic actions of the game. Okay, if this
Right.
slides, then this tile wraps around here on this action, but it doesn't wrap around on this action, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and that really is rough when you have to spend a lot of mental energy just executing the move, not planning the move, thinking
Right.
through, not the strategy, but just how do I mechanically finish this move correctly?
Right.
We found, especially in our first play, that that was just a lot. And quite frankly, in the second play, uh, still spending a fair amount of energy through that. It became we knew what we were doing, but it was still a little rough.
Yeah.
Um, so those are like the two big things that I went into thinking about. The action selection, I love the tile sliding. Beyond kind of the just some of the rules around that. We also it just ended up being a little fiddly,
Hmm.
which I think is to be expected.
Right.
But a little bit fiddly is fine, but a little bit fiddly with that extra cognitive load on top was not a great feeling at times.
Yeah. And everything you've said, totally agree with you. Um, I actually, after we've played it, I asked the group, like, okay, what were your thoughts? And some people were like, actually, I do like a little bit of randomness in my game, and they felt did not have that at all. So they just felt that it was a little restrictive for them specifically in this
Sure.
game, and I could kind of see where they were coming from with that for sure. Um, we struggled actually first couple of plays, and I don't know if it was a spatial element or just the way that the game played. I didn't find it overly intuitive for me, and that
I
could
think
be
that's a
me.
really good word. I would agree. It did not feel intuitive, and I think that that's an excellent description for my feelings on it.
Okay, yeah, because I had friends that were like, yeah, got it, no problem, and I'm sitting there like, why am I just like not getting this? Like it took me a minute to kind of latch on to some things, so that was a bit tricky for me. But like you were saying, I really enjoyed the action selection. That was really nice, and really monitoring those workers because it could happen where you have no spaces. Don't let it get to that. It happened in our game one time, so you got to be cognizant of these sorts of things. So I mean, I'm not going to add much more to what you're saying, but that's kind of where it stayed. The downtime came up. This is not a game that you can plan, not really, because you can plan and then
Yeah.
the board moves and changes so much that by the time it gets back to you, you're like, well, I can't do what I was thinking of doing. Do you know what I mean? So you're limited. Like, I mean, you have limited actions, but now you have to kind of rethink what you're going to do. So I know that was a thing. So I do find the downtime. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but there's some people who just that's too long. So if you're a
Right.
planner, that you might struggle here a little bit because it's just not
Well,
something can happen.
be not only can, there's only so much you can plan ahead, but
Sure.
also, if you are a planner, there is a lot to think through
Oh,
because
yeah.
every tile interaction, every meeple movement, every decision about which track you're going to move, every action order choice you
Yeah.
make,
Matters.
you can sit in a turn and process all of that. So that is a very, so if you are a player that struggles with over analysis in a turn, I think that this type of game, because it's perfect information and you have so much control, it definitely is ripe for you sitting staring and doing a lot of mental calculation. And
Right.
because of the way the tiles slide, sometimes that's rougher even for people who sit there and analyze a lot because it's not pure math, right? There's some
Mhm.
physics involved that you can be hard for folks to visualize,
Right.
which is interesting as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that we especially struggled with, and we struggled with it in our first play, and then in the second play I did, which was with a different group, we struggled again, was the lava overflow with the volcanoes. So
Yeah.
when
Oh,
did
we
the
had
lava
questions about that.
yeah, yes, it flows off the open side of the land, but if there isn't an open side, what's it do? That kind of thing. The lava overflow rules were just there. It felt like they're. It, I will also this beep, zoop. I will also say the rule book is unusual. It is
Yes.
organized in an uncommon way, and I'm not saying it's a bad rule book, but
Mhm.
I am saying it is. I do not see many rule books that are organized
Right.
in this way,
Right.
and I found that I felt like every action needed 4 more examples in the rule book. And that may have actually solved a lot of our
See, and I found the order was not right
challenge.
either.
It it was it is a unique organization structure to the rule book for sure.
Because, like, even me
Um,
explaining it to you just now, I had to say, I'm going to get to that. Or I'm going to come to that. Like, building should have been something they talked about earlier versus at the end.
it did feel like you didn't have context
Right.
for the actions in the that was presented in the rule book. I can definitely see that when you're talking about like, oh, building should be
Yeah.
earlier and that kind of thing. So like the volcano is a good example. We just were wanting for examples because we found that we're coming up with these scenarios relatively early in our games of, well, wait a minute, is this does this edge, does it go here? Do we get the choice? When is it mandatory? When does it go this way? Okay, this collides, becomes a volcano, the volcano erupts, and then it becomes a 4 volcano and a 1 volcano because the volcano power is 5. And it just, it wasn't, we didn't, there were many times we weren't sure we were playing the game correctly.
Right.
And
Right.
that was frustrating.
Yeah.
And that felt like the kind of thing, like we were going on BGG and looking up rules questions and things like that. And again, that feels like something with more examples or something like that. I don't know what solves that, a different approach to a rule book or something like that. But that's, again, that is cognitive load that has really nothing to do with playing the
Right.
game and experiencing the game.
Right.
And that
Exactly.
does drag down the experience as you're just trying, am I executing this correctly is not something that you want to be thinking about from beginning to end of your first game experience, you
Right.
know? And
Right.
and we found that it was we especially in that first game, it was just a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, even game two for me, game three, like, I was on the struggle bus a little bit there. Like, yeah, it took me a minute to kind of, and I feel like you're right. Had things kind of just been a little more clarified or maybe organized a little differently in the rule book, I may have not had as much of a struggle, and the enjoyment level would have been higher. This is not to say that it was a bad game or that I didn't enjoy myself, but that definitely would have kind of taken it to another level for me. And we didn't even get into it too much. We were ready to play this 2-player on here, and I was even
Oh,
considering
yeah.
learning it solo until
This
I
goes
was
back
like,
to Branchling's question earlier,
right.
yeah.
So if you're still there, branching, like, pardon? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, Suzanne, but
Well, there's solo and it's more like a puzzle challenge, which
right.
sounds like it could be fun. But if you play two-player, it requires an automa. And ultimately, Mandy and I were going through it, and we realized that we could not we weren't really thinking that this was a streamable game without an Atoma. But then as soon as we realized it had an Atoma, we were like, we're out. We
Yeah.
cannot do that. That especially when you're reading what the Atoma does. Um, and so I've never played 2-player. I've played 4-player and 3-player.
Me too.
And not solo, not 2-player. And I don't see a scenario where I would ever want to play this game 2-player. And more power to the folks that do, but reading how the Atoma works, looking at people who have played 2-player, I'm not seeing a ton of super positive comments about the 2-player specifically.
Right.
Not solo, very
No.
puzzly, a lot of people really enjoying it.
Sure.
Not 3 or 4, we
But
have our
the 2.
complaints, but but at the 2-player count, I'm not hearing a lot of love for the way that ended up working out. So I don't think I'd ever try this game at 2. So yes, it says it plays 1 to 4, but it sounds like it would be maybe not a 2-player.
Yeah, maybe not a 2-player game. Yeah. So
Your mileage may vary.
yeah. Overall, our group after discussion, and I had 2 different groups that I played this game with. First group, loved it. They also kind of caught on to it, I think, a little quicker. I know for myself, I struggle sometimes with spatial type games, so that happens. But they were in the like, oh, this is amazing, we love it, which is great. And then the other group that I had played with, I think they were at like, this is about a 6 out of 10. They said it would be a game that I don't know if I would play, or like if someone would have to ask me and be like, I really want to play it. Now, it could have just been, like I said, because there were just so many questions, like, okay, is this right? Or like clarifications and stuff. And this is after like I've played it before. So it really just depends, I think, what type of games you like to begin with and how you are catching on to the game. Because if it's a struggle, yeah, it does make it a little frustrating.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I will also say that my understanding is that this is the designer's first published game, and that's a big deal. And I think what I will say about Oros, it's an ambitious game,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
It has a lot going on. Mandy, to your point, it is basically perfect information, right? The only outside influence are your opponents, and it is a lovely production.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of moving parts, a lot of potential planning, and I think that that'll be really appealing to some people.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
again, as a first time design, there's a lot of potential and a lot of interesting things. I love the action selection and how that works in general here. So that I think while Oros isn't a game that I loved, I'm not sitting here going, "Oh, when can I play Oros again?"
Sure.
It does make me interested in the designer. It does
Yeah.
make me think this person has some really neat ideas, and it'll be great to see them grow and evolve in their game design approach over time, because Oros does have a lot of interesting things going on.
Yeah, and that's it. At the end of the day, it's not a bad game. I kind of fall into the same camp as Suzanne. I'm just not like, I need to play this again. But I definitely saw Table at Game Night where they were like, I can't wait to play the game, and that's
Yeah,
okay. There's games
different
for
strokes,
everybody.
different folks.
Exactly. So I think that's it. I'm surprised we didn't have any more questions, but I feel like this is one we'll get questions after the fact.
Sounds like it will be, yeah. So that's Oros, folks. Thanks for hanging out with us for our first time ever live review. We'll see if we like, we'll talk about Mandy, see if this works, see if we like this approach. It's kind of fun. It was great for folks who asked questions in the chat. Thank you for
Yeah,
that, because
thank you.
I think that's one of the benefits of live streaming discussions, right? Is that people can ask and get their questions answered right away, which is always, who doesn't like immediacy for questions, right? It's a beautiful thing. And
Exactly.
Branch says, no questions because the explanation was good. Well, thank
Oh,
you. That's very kind of you.
yeah, I was trying to do too many things. So I'm sorry, but I appreciate the comment.
So that's it for Oros. Now, Mandy and I are actually going to end the stream, take a water break, and then we're going to be recording episode 11 of the Salt and Sass Games podcast with a special guest this episode. So I'm very excited
Yes.
about that. Mandy, what's our next stream that you've got scheduled on Twitch?
I'm trying to think. So the next stream, well, actually, the next stream I have is, I think, with David in a couple of weeks. I think we're doing Paper Dungeons, so that's going to be on the YouTube channel. So it'll be fun.
Paper
You and I are
Dungeons.
doing, I feel like it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't think of it right now. Oh, we have a few. We have Votes for Women, coming up.
Oh, yeah.
And these are all on the schedule, so check the schedule to see when we're doing that. Votes for Win, and then the Animals of Baker Street, which is super
Oh,
cute.
yes. That's such a cute.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
So
yes,
check
yes.
the schedule. We'll post up there, and or check the social Salt N Sass Games. So Salt the letter N Sass Games on Twitter, and we also post when we're streaming there as well.
So thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching our live review of Oros. Thanks for joining us or watching the VOD. And we'll just see you next time. Don't forget to download episode 11 next week. It'll be a good one.
Yes. Bye, everybody.